No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
And here we are. This is Mike Lodge. I am the business advisor. I'm glad that you're back and join me this bright, fine, sunshiny day. Financial news is not so good, is it? We are watching a lot of banks this morning. After the Federal Reserve Chairman spoke yesterday about raising interest rates again, it kind of attacked the weaker banks, and they lost a lot of their value. And it went zooming down after the hours of trading, and it is now at a point where we have to start thinking about, are we going to have some more bank failures here? Is the FDIC going to have to come in? Now, you have to realize that we have several things happening in the banking industry at the moment. One, we've got banks out there who have commercial loans or commercial real estate loans who are not performing. In other words, they have very little tenants in their buildings to be able to pay for on these loans that they have. And so we are starting to see defaults. Some of these buildings are going into foreclosure. And then the other issue is that the interest rates and their investments that they have made are hurting them, especially when the interest rate goes up as of yesterday. Again, it's going to hurt some of these banks. So what the Federal Reserve did is probably not the right thing to do. Probably they should have put a pause on their interest rates. In listening to a forum yesterday that has a bunch of investors and bankers and everything in this room, the conversation went not to a good point. And they begin to start looking at three banks, and the terminology of contagion started to appear, and a banking crisis. And now they're willing to call it a banking crisis. So the three banks that we're looking at this morning is PacWest Bank Corp, Western Alliance Bank Corp, and Metropolitan Bank Holding Corp. Now, yesterday, PacWest Bank lost 54.67% of their value. That's a big drop. That's a dangerous drop. Western Alliance had 25.80% of a drop in their value. Metropolitan had an 18.05. So as you can see, this is a concern because when the bank value goes down, you have to wonder, do they have the cash flow? And not only that, but these companies, banks have also had business losses. And when banks have business losses, you have to be very, very concerned about the stability of the bank. When they have people taking their money out of the bank and putting it someplace else, they are losing their cash. Your cash, if you're in those banks. So we're looking at these very carefully this morning, and by the weekend, forecasted out for the weekend, a couple more days, we may see the FDIC going in and taking control of one or two banks because of the stability of the bank. This is and Powell came out yesterday and said, no, the banks are safe. President Biden came out and said, no, the banks are safe. Well, I'm kind of telling you right now, I don't believe the banks are safe. Let's just say it, they're not safe. we have, one, bad management. Secondly, we have high interest rates. We have bad loans, and no one's going to want to buy off a bad loan. Are you going to go in and buy a loan off of a bank on a commercial real estate property that they have no income coming in because most people have moved out of these buildings? Look at San Francisco. San Francisco has a whole bunch of empty buildings. Los Angeles has had some defaults in downtown Los Angeles on some high-rise buildings. So we're starting to see a bad situation for the banks, and we have to be very concerned about the stability of the banks. This is not the type of information that we ever want to hear about. But unfortunately, with inflation, going into recession, and with high interest rates, and maybe we should have put a pause on this last one, and maybe the chairman will come back and say, okay, we are going to reverse that. I don't know. It would be good if he did, because maybe that's what we need. We need to slow it down just a little bit, because it is affecting the banks, especially when they have non-performing loans and those interest rates are going up on those loans. It's not good. It's not good. So people are not going to be able to afford to keep those that commercial real estate property. So we have to look at also what the news is out there on the commercial real estate companies who hold these buildings. What are they doing? It's very important. Now the other question is, the other concern I should say is, what are we doing about this debt ceiling? And are we going to go into a default? Now, this is what's interesting to me on this, is that Biden called Speaker McCarthy and said, listen, let's meet on May 9th. Let's meet on May 9th. And then all of a sudden he starts bashing McCarthy and his budgetary plan and also debt ceiling plan. He starts bashing them. So if you're going to sit down at a table and negotiate a debt ceiling and negotiate some spending cuts, because it's needed, it has to happen, but you start bashing those people instead of coming to the table with a plan of your own or a markup of the current GOP plan. If you're not coming to the table in good faith, I can almost guarantee you will go into default. So I think we probably should start calling Joe Biden Default Joe, because he is the one pushing this into a default. There's a plan on the table, and Schumer should probably just shut up now, because he's just out there bashing the GOP too, but he has no plan of his own. So when you've got a president with no plan, you've got a leader of the Senate with no plan, but you have a plan on the table from the GOP that you can negotiate on, but all you do is sit there and bash it. You're not coming in onto the negotiations or discussions in good faith. So Default Joe is probably going to drive us into default. So you and I should probably understand how a default could affect you. And we have to realize that millions of Americans rely on federal payments to make ends meet. And it could negatively impact a lot of Americans and a lot of contractors who have government contracts with the United States government. If allowed to happen, what the economists are saying, and they agree upon, that this first debt default in U.S. history would be an economic disaster. I don't know if I actually agree with that, but that's what the economists are saying. Now, Secretary of Treasury sent a letter to Speaker McCarthy and said, listen, by June 1st, we're going to run out of money to make our obligations. Now, we knew this. Back in 2022, we knew that June 1st or sometime in June that the money was going to run out. The problem is that our tax intake of money coming in from taxpayers has gone down. So that means that there's less money to hold us off for a few more weeks or months. So now we knew all these months that June was going to be the drop dead date, and yet we did nothing. The GOP came up with a plan. The Democrats and Biden have come up with nothing. They knew that this time was coming, but they did nothing. So we have this situation where government once again has failed us because they knew that a deadline was approaching. June was the due date, and the president sat there and did nothing except ridicule the other party for coming up with something. So at the moment, we don't have leadership on our economic side of this country. Will it affect Social Security? Probably not. Payments to 67 million Social Security beneficiaries could be halted. However, in 1996, a law provides an escape clause that allows the Treasury Department to continue paying Social Security benefits, even if there is a delay in raising the debt ceiling. There is legal authority, and it's argued that it should be used. So, will it be that big of an economic disaster? I don't think so. Because I believe that if people are smart out there, that they would, if you have government funding coming in, especially if you're a business, that you are prepared for it. There's going to be layoffs. Yes, people are going to lose their job. There will be funding inabilities. I'm not quite sure what happens to the FDIC if we go into default, and we have all of these banks at the close to the edge line of disaster. So we have to prepare for it. Make sure that you have cash in your hand. Make sure that you have taken care of the majority of your bills to last at least a month, and just start preparing for a government failure, even though they knew about it for months and months and months. We have a crazy nation at the moment, and everybody wants to lie to you and say, no, we don't have a problem, when we do have a big-time problem. So once again, we Americans have to hold the bag, and we have to do what's best for us. Listen, if you have any questions, send me an email to thebusinessadvisor@gmail.com. If you would like to sit down on a business advisory or coaching, go to my website and schedule me online at www.lodge-co.com. Everybody go out and have a good day today. Remember, there's going to be bad news. We're prepared for it. Have patience. Don't panic. We're going to get through this. Talk with you soon. Bye-bye.